Hello everyone, how are you? Welcome to my channel. This is Fortino Academics and it's me Ermias. Today with this tutorial I'm going to present you a tutorial on the course Freshman Economics and from the chapter which is chapter 6 in the title of Fundamental Concepts of Macroeconomics. And today we will be looking at, or we will be defining, the national income accounting, and we will see in detail the differences between the two kinds of national income accounting approach, which are GDP and GNP. So after completing today's tutorial, you will be able to differentiate between GDP and GNP. Anyways, before starting the tutorial, if you are new for Fortino Academics, don't forget to subscribe the channel, and if you like the video, don't forget to hit the like button and also subscribe button, and also share it for friends. And I hope you will be having a very nice time with this tutorial, so stay with me. Okay, to begin with, let me introduce you with the content of today's tutorial. As I told you, today we will be looking at chapter 6, which is Fundamental Concepts of Macroeconomics. And with this tutorial, we will be covering the goals of macroeconomics, one. And the second one will be the national income accounting and its approach in measuring national income. So to begin with, let us see the goals of macroeconomics. And the first goal of macroeconomics is to achieve a high economic growth as a country. Every nation should grow, and this growth shall be high. And in order to achieve such a high economic growth is the goal of macroeconomics. The second is to reduce unemployment. First of all, when we say unemployment, it represents the number of people who are jobless currently and actively searching for a job but not able to find one. So we as a country shall reduce unemployment, and it is one of the goals of macroeconomics. Third goal of macroeconomics is to attain a stable price and reduce inflation. The price of goods and services throughout the economy must be stable in order to have a healthy economy. And also with this goal, we will be attaining a lower level of, maintaining the lower level of inflation is similar and a related goal of macroeconomics to this concept. And then the fourth goal of macroeconomics is to reduce budget deficit of a given government, which means the expenditures the government makes and the amount of income that it receives has to be balanced. At least the deficit must be reduced. This is also the goal, one of the goals of macroeconomics, and also to reduce the balance of payment deficits, in a sense that as a country we will export, as a country we will import. So reducing the amount of the difference between import and export is also the most important goal of macroeconomics. So balance of payment become deficit when import is greater than that of export. So this deficit shall be reduced is the goal of macroeconomics. And finally, we have to ensure fair distribution of income. We say that making sure that there is a high economic growth in a country, then after this growth happens, the income generated in the country must be fairly distributed to the people of that nation. Otherwise, that growth will not be healthy, okay? And also ensuring that this fair distribution of income happens is the goal of macroeconomics. Now, continuing to the concept of national income accounting, we define national income accounting as it is an income record of a level of economic activities throughout the economy. Accounting record, in a sense, writing or taking a note of accounting activities, economic activities throughout the economy. We have to register economic activities which means it is national income accounting. It is a measure of aggregate output. You can measure national income using output, and also you can measure national income using income, and you can also measure national income using expenditure in the economy. So in other words, national income accounting is a measure of aggregate output or aggregate inputs, income, or an aggregate expenditure throughout the economy. How many ways or approach do we have to measure national income? Is the next question that we will be answering. We have two ways or two approaches to measure national income, and they are GDP and GNP. GDP stands for Gross Domestic Product, while GNP stands for Gross National Product. Before getting into detailed definition and explanation of GDP and GNP, let us briefly, highlightly explain the basic conceptual differences between GDP and GNP. In order to do that, let's have a two countries example. Let's say that we have two countries, country red and country blue. And also let's say that country A do have citizens R1, R2, R3, R4, R5, and R6. And foreigners working in a country red coming from country blue, B7 and B8. B7 and B8 are citizens of country blue, but they are now in a country red in order to work in country red. Similarly, let's say that country blue do have citizens B1, B2, B3, B4, B5, and B6 inside the country, and also foreigners R7 and R8 from country red to work in country blue as a worker. So let's have this scenario. And next to that, let's make differences between GDP and GNP. In order to measure GDP of country red, GDP, which is Gross Domestic Product, GDP measures the output of country red in a sense that all the outputs produced by all the workers inside the country, irrespective of their citizenship, whether they are citizens of the red country, whether the workers are citizens of the blue country, GDP counts the output produced by every worker inside the country domestically. So in order to do that, we will add output from R1, R2, R3, R4, R5, and R6. Also production by B7 and B8, irrespective of their citizenship, but only geographical location is considered here. Okay, then in order to measure GNP of country rate, in order to measure GNP of country rate, what we have to do is summing output produced by the citizens of country red, irrespective of their geographical location. So we will add outputs of all red citizens, not the blues. So GNP of country red is equal to output of R1, R2, R3, R4, R5, R6, and R7 and R8 produced in a country blue. So here, irrespective of their geographical location, but irrespective of citizenship, we will add output produced by citizens of the red country. And the discussion that we have had for the red country will immediately work as for the blue country. So when we are discussing about GDP, we will add outputs produced by everyone inside the country, irrespective of their citizenship. But while we are calculating GNP of a given country, we will add output produced by citizens of a given country, irrespective of their current location. Okay, so this are the basic differences between GNP and GDP. Now we can go into detailed definition and explanation of GDP and GNP. So GDP, it is a total value in a sense. We count the outputs and we change it into monetary value. So GDP is the value of a total value of currently, underline this word, produced final outputs, which is goods and services, underline final, that are produced within a country boundary, inside the country, during a given period of time, usually 1 year, and irrespective of the citizenship or the ownership of the resources. So how many points can we understand here? Here, first, it has to be total value, not total quantity. We have to change the total quantity of the output into a value by multiplying by a price. Then this total value of what? Of the final. Why do we say final goods and services? When we say final goods and services, for example, in a production of vehicles, the final product is a car, right? So we have to count the number of cars that the given country produced. We don't have to count tires. If you count tires, and also if you count cars, it means that tires are counted twice in the country. Once in the tire counting, and second in a counting of a car. When we say a car, it means that it contains tires, right? So we have to count the final product, which is a car, not the tires and other spare parts of the car. And in GDP, we consider production by within a country's boundary, which means that we will count, as we have seen in the slide before, we will count everything produced within the country, irrespective of the citizenship of the workers, and also at a given period of time. If it is for 2020, or it will be for 2021, or it will be for 2022. So we have to specify the period of the GDP consideration, and most of the time it is 1 year. So here we can understand that GDP measure current production only, Second, it takes into account only final goods and services in order to avoid double counting of outputs or resources. And when we say final goods and services, we do not include intermediate products in our GDP calculation. For example, tire is an intermediate product which is going to completely used for the next production, which is a car. So when we say intermediate goods, these are goods that are going to be completely used in the production of other products in the same period that they themselves are produced. So whenever we count a given product, we have to make sure that it is a final product for that a given year at which they have been produced. Okay, so the other point that we can understand from the definition of GDP, that it measures the value of final goods and services produced within the boundary of a country, which means irrespective of who owns that output, which means irrespective of the resource ownership, whether the resources are owned by other countries, we don't care. Whether these resources are citizens of other countries, we don't care. We just count the values of a final goods and services which are actually being produced within the boundary or a territory of a given country. Okay, and also When discussing about double counting, for example, as I told you before, if you count 4 tires here and also another car, if you count for the country 4 tires and also if you count 1 car, it means that 4 tires a country is producing, 1 car a country is producing, then it means that we will make total produced tires in a given country to be 8. 1, 2, 3 and 4, and also 1, 2, 3 and 4. Actually it was 4, right? 1, 2, 3 and 4 tires were the result, not 8. So we are committing a mistake of double counting the tires. So we have to count the final product, which is 1 car. All right? This phenomena, this concept works for every product. We don't have to count wheat and bread again. We have to count bread, which means when we count bread, we are counting wheat. Once you count bread, you don't have to count flour, you don't have to count also wheat. We have to measure or count the final product, which is bread. Okay, this is the way that we have to do. The other concept that we have to understand in measuring GDP is the value, not the quantity, right? So when we say the value, it means that we have to multiply the output, which is I stands for output 1, output 2, output 3, output 4, something like that. So we have to change this output into a market value by multiplying it by its price. So for example, output 1 times price 1 plus output 2 times price 2 plus and output n times price n plus, then it will give us GDP, which is the total market value of goods and services produced in a given country within a boundary at a given period of time. So PI stands for price of a given product and Q stands for the quantity of a given output. Then let's go to the concept of GNP, which measures output produced by domestically owned resources. When we say domestically owned resources, it means that by the citizens or by resources owned by a given country, irrespective of their geographical location. Here we consider citizenship or ownership, not geographical location. So by definition, it is a total value of final goods and services which are currently produced as GDP, but not inside the boundary, or not only inside the boundary of the country. Any production by domestically owned means that country owns these factors of production, which are resources. If it is worker, it means that citizens of that country in a given period of time, usually 1 year, now irrespective of their geographical location. In GDP, geographical location is considered inside the boundary of the country, but irrespective of citizenship. But here, citizenship is considered irrespective of geographical location of the resources or the citizens. Now, by the way, GDP and GNP are related. The way that they are related is by this formula. GNP is equal to GDP plus net factor income. This is a formula that you have to keep in your mind. But the question how and what do we mean by saying NFI is going to be answered by the next concepts or explanations. NFI denotes net factor income received from abroad, which means it is equal to factor income received from abroad by our citizens. Okay, if we are country rate, we will add or we will count the factor income or the output produced by our citizens in a country blue minus, okay, less factor income paid or the output produced by foreigners in our country, which is country red. Is that clear for you? We will add factor income, which is output produced by our citizens in foreign country, by our citizens in foreign country, minus output or factor income that we have paid for foreigners inside our country. So NFI could be negative. NFI could be negative if factor income paid for foreigners is greater than that of factor income received from abroad by our citizens. Will be positive if factor income received from abroad by our citizens is greater than that of factor income paid for foreigners. And it will become zero if factor income received from abroad by a country citizen, by our citizen, is equal to factor income paid for foreigners to abroad inside our country. So, before going into the impact if NFI is positive, negative, or zero, let us see some concepts for NFI. NFI, we said that it is factor income received from abroad by a given country's citizens. Let's say we are a country red, so our citizens' payment in a blue country less the factor income that we have paid for foreigners which are blues to abroad in our country. So by formula, let's say that this is country red and this is country blue. Now, previously we have said we have in our country red, we have 2 foreigners, and in a country blue they have 2 foreigners, R7 and R8, but B1 up to B6 are their own citizens working in their own country. But for our country, as an example, in country red, we have 2 foreigners working in our country, and also from R1 to R6 are our own citizens working inside our country. So in order to calculate NFI of country red, in order to calculate NFI of our country, we will, okay, we will add the outputs of our citizens in the country blue, R7 and R8, but minus the foreigners' production inside our country. Okay, so we will bring back the output of our citizen and we will send back the output of foreigners inside our country. So R7 will come here, R8 will come here, but B7 output will go here and B8 will go here, which means R7 plus R8 minus, okay, deducting this one, adding the reds, R7 and R8, but deducting the blues, okay, making it go away. So it will give us net foreign income of country red. Similarly, if net factor income of country blue is going to be considered, then we will send this, we will deduct this, we will make R7's and R8's output go to their country, which means minus. R7 and R8 are minus, but we will bring the output of B7 and B8 to their country plus. So for the blue, in order to get NFI, we have to add their citizens' payment or income abroad paid by the country red, and we have to deduct the payment given for R7 and R8 by blue country, and we will make it go away to country red. Then we said that GNP equals GDP plus NFI, right? Let's prove this thing. GDP of country red, as we have calculated in the example, it is given like this one. And we know that GNP of country red was this one, and NFI of a country red, we have seen in the previous slide that it was like this. So now let's prove that GNP is GDP plus NFI. Okay, let's prove that GNP, which is this one, the whole red is a summation of this one and this one. Okay, let's prove it. GDP plus NFI means GDP begins from this one, this is GDP, up to B8, from this up to this one, plus NFI is these two, then using calculation methods, this cancelled out this one because this sign is minus. This minus this means it becomes 0. So we are left with the whole reds. So GDP plus NFI is equal to R1, R2, R3, R4, R5, R6, R7, and R8, which is GNP equals GDP plus NFI. And this result is exactly the same to the GNP of a given country, which is the red. R1 up to R8 So yes, we proved that GNP is equal to GDP plus NFI. So we have said previously that NFI could be negative, positive, or 0. So depending upon the result of NFI, the GNP and GDP are related in the following way. If NFI is positive, if this one is positive, then we say that GNP will be greater than that of GDP, because we are adding a positive number on GDP, then GNP will be greater than that of GDP. If NFI is negative, which means we are deducting negative number, we are deducting a number from GDP, and which makes GDP to be greater than that of GNP. Okay, here make a correction, please. If NFI is negative, then the result will be GDP will be greater than that of GNP. Make this correction. And if NFI is equal to 0, if this is 0, adding a 0 number on GDP will not make it different from GNP. So GNP will be equal to GDP because this number is 0. Okay, so how many approaches do we have to measure GDP and GNP? By definition, we have 3 approaches. The first one is product. We will consider the production, the output, only we will count the output produced in a country. Expenditure approach, which will be considering only the expenditures made on the outputs of a given country. And the third one is income approach, in which it measures the income received by each resources inside the country in the production of the given output. These whole 3 methods are approaches to measure GDP, but will finally give us the same result. Okay, so we will see these approaches, and we will see them in detail by the next tutorial. So see you on the next tutorial of this chapter, which is part 2. So this is the end of today's tutorial. I hope I will be meeting you by other tutorials on, of course, this course as well as different courses. So until we meet again, please communicate with me using my official Telegram, Facebook, and email. So you can see my addresses over here. So feel free to comment. So until we meet again by other tutorials, see you. Bye bye.